Okay, so welcome to federal government. There is this quick introductory unit that I call Unit 0. It has 4 lessons in it that kind of give us some background information that will be beneficial as we move forward in our study of government. And so, as we move forward on this, and as we get into the lecture, I'm going to be pointing out a couple of things that might be beneficial to you as we progress through the unit. And so, the first thing that you need to make note of are the learning objectives and essential questions. And so, these are going to be things that will appear at the beginning of every PowerPoint lecture that you have. And so we have a couple of different learning objectives. We have the course learning objective, excuse me, and we have the departmental learning objective. And so I try to align my course learning objective with the departmental learning objective. And so our first learning objective, course learning objective for this first lesson is to explain what government is and what it does. And this correlates with the departmental learning objective, which is to explain the origin and development of constitutional democracy in the United States. And so it's going to give us a basis of what we need as we start to begin studying the development of constitutional democracy in the United States. The next part are the essential questions. And so at the end of this lecture, at the end of reading the assigned readings that correlate with the PowerPoints, these are the questions that you should be able to answer. And if you cannot answer these questions after having watched the lecture and read the information, then you need to go back and revisit the information or contact me so that we can get you on the right track. But the essential questions are pretty basic. And so for this first lecture, our essential questions are: number 1, what is the government? And number 2, what is the role of the government? So we're really going to be tying this back to the course learning objective, dealing with what exactly a government is and what exactly a government does. Now, my lectures, I really, really try not to have lectures longer than 20 to 25 minutes, but that doesn't always happen. We have a lot of information to cover, and so in an effort to try to cover that information well enough for you to do a good job in this course, my lectures might go on a little longer than the 20 to 25 minutes. Some may be shorter, some may be longer. Whatever the case, I do apologize, and I do hope that you will take the time to listen to and watch these lectures, because the information within these lectures, coupled with the information that you read about in your online textbook, coupled with the quizzes that you take, coupled with the discussion boards that we have, will all be fodder for our end of unit exams. And so it's going to be very beneficial and important for you to utilize all the tools that you are given. All right. And so, defining government and politics. And I'm going to take a quick little break right here, and I will be back to continue this in just. Okay, so defining government and politics. So, government and politics are sometimes used interchangeably, and they're not exactly the same. They each have different meanings, and so we need to understand the difference between them, even though they might be a little nuanced or a little bit subtle. But government, excuse me, describes the means by which a society organizes itself and allocates authority in order to accomplish collective goals and provide benefits that the society as a whole needs. So essentially, when we come together as a society, we have things that need to be accomplished. We need to allocate authority. We need to accomplish goals, and we need to ensure that society is taken care as a whole. And so it is through our government that we create as a society that accomplishes this. And so when a government is developed, they have a number of different goals in mind. Some of the goals include economic prosperity. We really charge our government in America with ensuring that we are prosperous economically, that we have the ability to go out and get a job and make money and pursue the things that we would like to pursue. We also very stringently charge our government with the security of our national borders. And especially after things like 9/11 occurred, this is going to become a much greater goal of our government here in America. And it is part of the debate that keeps raging in America in regards to immigration and immigration reform. And then we also charge our government with the safety and well-being of our citizens. And so we need them to provide some kind of police force, military force to protect the individuals within our society. Two, we hope that the government will provide us with certain benefits. Number one being an education. And in America, you get a K through 12 education, free of charge. Now, you can opt to go and get a private education that you have to pay for, but you are provided a free education from grades K through 12, which is compulsory. We also, on some level, hope that the government will provide us with health care if needed. And this is obviously a huge debate that has been raging in the United States since the passage of the Affordable Care Act, and in regards to how much the government should be involved in providing health care. But we seek health care benefits from the government if we cannot afford to provide those for ourselves. And then we also seek the benefits of an infrastructure for transportation so that we have the ability to be mobile and move around. The interstate highway system, railroads and canals and things of that nature. And so it is the government's job to provide these benefits for the people, and it is the goal of governments to secure some of these things in order to have an organized and beneficial society for everyone as a whole. If we look at politics, politics and government are interrelated, and politics is the process of gaining and exercising control within a government for the purpose of setting and achieving certain goals. And so you must have a government in order to exercise politics, because politics is essentially allocating control over the government in order to achieve certain things, especially things that are related to the division of resources within a nation. And so you have to have a government in order for politics to occur, and politics is essentially setting the agenda, achieving certain goals, and having the power to divide resources within a nation as you see fit. You cannot really talk about governments without also talking about economic systems. And economic systems are often confused with governmental systems because they are very closely related. Typically, a particular type of government will foster the growth of a particular type of economic system. Okay? And it might do so a little bit better than other types of governments might foster the growth of a certain economic system. And so we can look towards this idea of self-government and capitalism as an example. And so we turn to John Locke, who was an English political philosopher in the 17th century. He is the first individual that suggests that all people have natural rights, which include life, liberty, and property. And so this might sound familiar with our Declaration of Independence with Thomas Jefferson saying that we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But he didn't make that up. He borrowed this from the 17th century English political philosopher John Locke. And so as this idea of self-government is developing in the 17th century, so too is the idea of capitalism. And so the ideas of capitalism really the ideas of self-government really foster the growth of capitalism in certain places like America. Okay. It also fosters the ideas that people should be free to govern themselves through elected representatives. So you have John Locke as well as capitalism that are really developing in tandem with one another, and we're going to see British North American colonies and France really start to ascribe to this with the American Revolution as well as the French Revolution. Adam Smith is going to be the Scottish philosopher at the same time as the English philosopher John Locke in the 17th century, who is creating this idea of capitalism. And Adam Smith suggested that all people should be free to acquire property. And this might sound a little bit similar to John Locke's idea that people should have the freedom of property as a natural right. And so you can sort of see the overlap of this political system, this political idea of self-government, as well as this economic idea of capitalism sort of overlapping with one another. Smith also suggested that people should be allowed to operate as they wish and to keep the proceeds of their labor. And this should sound familiar to you as someone operating in America, because we have the ability to go out and operate as we wish in regards to working or selling something, as long as it fits within the guidelines of our laws, and we're allowed to keep the proceeds, most of the proceeds of our labor. Smith suggested that competition would ensure that prices remain low and faulty goods would disappear from the market. And so there wouldn't necessarily need to be much government intervention, because the markets would essentially regulate themselves. Prices would remain low because of competition. If I could sell a good at a lower cost than the other person can sell the good, people are naturally going to come to me, which will require that other person to lower their price. And so you have this competition that will occur. And if I have faulty goods, people are going to stop buying those, and they'll disappear from the markets and leave room for other competition to come in and start making that good as well. And so Adam Smith said that society would prosper. He said that businesses would have their proceeds and consumers would have their needs satisfied by the markets, by the competition that occurs, the low goods and the well-made goods. And so he is going to really amass these ideas, understand that this idea that Adam Smith had that everyone would prosper and benefit did not really hold true, because there is significant wealth gaps in capitalist nations where you have the extremely wealthy and the extremely poor. And so this is not going to really hold true. As with everything, these things sound really good in theory, but when put into practice, there are some unforeseen circumstances that we didn't really plan for. Nevertheless, Adam Smith did outline his ideas in what is a book known as The Wealth of a Nation, which incidentally was published in 1776, which was the same year as the Declaration of Independence. So there is some significant overlap between the idea of a self-government as well as this capitalist idea economic system. So they're going to develop together in the United States, and typically when you talk about democracy, which is a political system, people are going to automatically equate democracy with capitalism, which is an economic system. Okay, but the government gives freedom and individuality to people to act without being controlled too much. Going back to that idea that some governments foster the creation of certain economic systems better, you have that play out with a democracy and with capitalism. Okay? However, although they're equated, capitalism and democracy do not have to go together. Yes, democracy provides a situation where capitalism can flourish a lot better, but understand they do not have to go together. Wealth gaps create a system where a small, wealthy minority in society has great influence over the government, and so it does not always represent the views held by the majority of the population. And if we're talking about a representative government, we usually are talking about a majority of the population. That doesn't always occur in practice when you have capitalism creating these big wealth gaps. And so, as a response to this capitalist idea, we're going to see the emergence of socialism. And socialism is the means of generating wealth, factories, farm banks, all owned by the government, not private individuals. And so the government essentially makes the wealth and redistributes it to other individuals. And they do this through what are known as social programs. Free or inexpensive health care, education, child care. They also do it through utilities like electricity, airlines, railroads, telecommunication systems. Most socialist nations are going to emerge as what is known as an oligarchy, or a government system where only certain members of a political party are or ruling elite can participate in government. And a good example of an oligarchic system that has socialism as their economic system is going to be China, right? Only members of the Communist Party can run for government. It's a very tyrannical style of socialism that sort of plays out as communism. But going back to that idea that certain governments foster the growth of certain economic systems, an oligarchy is really going to foster the growth of socialism and communism in certain nations. And so you will have some situations where socialism becomes very tyrannical. However, there are what are known as social democracies. And a social democracy is essentially a mix of socialism and democracy where states provide social programs for citizens, but also have democratic elements to government. These are going to be the systems that are not tyrannical. Okay, and we're going to see this occur in places like Sweden. Sweden provides social programs for citizens, but they have a democratic element to their government, right? And so instead of owning all of the means of production, what they do is they place a higher tax on individuals who make more money, and then they take that money from the tax and they create social programs for the citizens who are less fortunate. And so they're going to have a very socialist style of economic system, but there is democracy in there as well. And so it's not tyrannical in nature, and it's a more, I don't know, open society that's more reliant on the welfare for their individuals, their citizens. Okay. So, the United States, what do we have? We have a democratic government that works closely with a capitalist society, right? We have a capitalist economic system. It affects how goods and services are distributed. We have what is known as the market. And the market is going to provide many goods and services that are needed by Americans. Food, housing, clothing, right? Private businesses provide these things and then earn profits in return, right? And so when a private business manufactures clothing, they can sell it on the market, people purchase it, and those businesses take that profit that they have earned and they keep it. These are known as private goods, right? Private goods are things that you can go out and get just by purchasing them. And they're typically affordable to everybody on some level. However, markets cannot always provide everything that is needed, and so therefore the government provides certain public goods to all of society in the United States. Things like national security. Because everyday individuals like you and me cannot afford our own national security force. We cannot afford our own police force or military in order to keep us safe. And so we must rely collectively on the government to provide this public good for us. Education, it's provided to all children, right? Regardless of age, race, ethnicity, or gender. But, so it is a public good, but you can go out and purchase a private education. So a private education is not a public good. It is what is known as a toll good, which is available to individuals only if you can pay the cost. So you get a public good in a education that's provided to all children, K through 12, but you can, eschew that public good and purchase a toll good to get a different type of education. Police and fire departments are also going to be public goods that we cannot afford ourselves, our own police force, our own fire departments, and so we rely collectively on the government to provide those for us. Public transportation, excuse me, if we cannot afford an automobile and you live in an area that has public transportation, then the government provides that. You might have to pay a small fee to ride the bus or to take the subway, but the government provides it to people for as a public good for the benefit of everybody. Same for public housing, mail service, and healthcare for low socioeconomic classes. So individuals who might rely on Medicaid and then Medicare for the elderly. This is provided, a public good provided by the government for lower socioeconomic classes. And then there are things called the common good, and these are going to be available for free of charge for all people but are unlimited supply. And so it's the job of the government to protect those. And examples of common goods are fish in the sea, right? Available for everybody to go fish, clean drinking water, but these require protection so that the few do not take advantage of the good and sort of rob it from everybody within society. And so one thing that you will note as we come to the close of our each lecture is I reinsert the titles, the objective slide at the end so that you can sort of revisit the learning objectives and the essential questions. And so you can look back on, if you took notes, some of the information that you took, and you can either physically answer these questions in a notebook, or you can mentally sort of go through, do I know what a government is? Do I know what the role of a government is? Have I met the course learning objective? Have I started to meet the departmental learning objective? Because the course learning objective is very specific to the lecture that we're doing, and the departmental learning objective might be something that we build upon as we move forward. So I just like to put this in here as a way for you to go back and sort of check yourself to make sure that you are on the right track. And so that's going to conclude lesson number 1 of this introductory unit, and I hope that I haven't taken up too much of your time, because I can get kind of verbose once I get to lecturing. But please feel free to give me a holler if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or if you need any clarifications, and I will see you in lesson 2.